I know you analyse quite closely what managers say, Simon. You had a smile on your face when you listened to Ange there. What do you think of what he is saying at this time to try and get around the fact that they get themselves in the driving seat and then they throw it away?
Well, I always think there is something to be said about if you're doing something right that gets you into a position of ascendancy, why would you change it? It's the opposition that need to change because they're the ones that are getting beat. In the two instances where he's had this put on his toes are against very good sides. Tottenham were not in control of this game. The game was still there to be taken, and Chelsea were in this game. And so the fact they went 2-0 ahead and caught Chelsea early, you could ask yourself, why did Chelsea put themselves in a position where they were 2-0 down before they got started? I think if you look at Brighton and you look at Chelsea, they're two very good sides. So the fact that Tottenham have gone 2-0 up against these sides and lost these games, I don't think is as telling as people might like to make it. I do agree with the principle of looking at situations, being pragmatic, but also if you're doing things right, why would you change something? How are you going to game manage 11 minutes into a game? When do you start managing a game? You're 2-0 up. You've got the opposition into a cleft position. You ain't going to start managing it for another 79 minutes, are you? You're going to continue to play the way you do. They get back into the game relatively quickly, Chelsea, and the rest takes care of itself.
But have you not got to go some, Simon, to throw it away? Martin's taking it a second. They keep throwing it away.
But did they throw it away, or did Chelsea? Are Chelsea a very good side that took it back from them?
How did you see it, Martin? Did they throw it away?
Well, I think though, if you look, you've got to look across the board here, Jim. What's happening? It's a very similar thing that's happening in every game, isn't it? You're saying that they go hell for leather, they push really high. There's a bit of craziness to their play, and their two centre halves really are really key to what they do, Jim, because they're so high up the pitch, and then they have these recoveries. Van der Ven, I'm really worried about the number of times that he's had hamstring injuries. This is a real concern for him now, and they are throwing things away, Jim. I do like the way that, you could say, well, okay, how are they going to beat Chelsea? Because this is a really good Chelsea team. They're going to have to really go after them, but then they can't make mistakes. When you're in front in a game, you do have to game manage. It doesn't matter if it's the 10th minute, the 12th minute. If you find yourself 2-0 up, you make sure that you get people behind the ball, and you're hard to beat, and that wasn't the case yesterday.
Well, this is it.
But the Man City, when Man City get 2-0 up against sides, do they get game managed, or do they keep on doing the same thing? And if you look at Tottenham, if they'd have done their jobs against Crystal Palace and Ipswich, two teams that you would have expected them to win against, they'd be fourth in the league now. This conversation wouldn't be happening.
If though, Simon. But the reality, it's the 11th time they've lost the Premier League game after being 2+ goals ahead.
Shh. Okay.
They're repeat offenders.
Fine, out of 1,000 games. Look, the bottom line is they're in the quarterfinals of the EFL Cup. Mm-hmm. They're in 9th position. They've got Rangers this week in the Europa League. They win that game, they get into the qualifying spaces of the Europa League. Did anybody really think that Tottenham were going to win the league? No. Are they miles away from being inside the top 4? No. Is it good enough that they've lost games against the teams that I talk about? And those are the ones that I'm more worried about, which is the Ipswich and Palaces. I've got any worry whatsoever. If you get beat by a very good Chelsea side by giving them, Chelsea gave Tottenham a 2-goal head start and clawed it back. I think a lot more has to be said about the performance of Chelsea than it does necessarily about the performance of Tottenham. Man City roll forward. They roll on. When they get a team 2-0 against a side 2-0 up, they don't stop. They don't suddenly go, it's 79 minutes to go. Let's work out how we can game manage.
I get it, but the same thing keeps happening. And now, it doesn't make good reading, Simon. They've won just one of their past 7 games. We saw what happened with Ange speaking to his own fans after they lost a game more recently at Bournemouth. We saw what happened against Brighton. We've seen what's going on. Literally yesterday, it's now come to a head. And for Jamie Carragher, Postecoglou said to you and I earlier on in the season, Simon, there is no ceiling. There is no ceiling. He regards the place. There's no ceiling as to what we may achieve. Yeah. But in the boardroom, is there a ceiling? Because Carragher is now saying it could be time for Daniel Levy. Someone else needs to be in charge of the football club. Albeit, the stadium is magnificent and so is the training ground. But in terms of aspirations, in terms of what they may or may not win, maybe getting to the next level, the question mark has to be asked about Levy. So much so, Carragher thinks, time up.
Well, the question will always be asked because you've got a football club that's all fur cut and no knickers, isn't it? It looks very good, but it doesn't win anything. So there'll always be this opportunity to weaponise it against the owner. Let's see how that works. Who's going to buy Tottenham and pay £4 billion that Joe Lewis and Daniel Levy will want? How does it work when you get someone in the door? Because it's working really well at the moment with Manchester United and Jim Ratcliffe, this new intellectual capital that's coming in. Just what happened on the field against Chelsea and Brighton has nothing to do with the owner. That's to do with the manager and what he decides to do in a game. Now, I do agree that in order for Tottenham to be more competitive, and you go back to the seasons when they lost the Champions League final, the argument is, why didn't they back it then? People come out, David Pleat sat in the studio and said it was nothing to do with Levy, it was to do with Mauricio Pochettino didn't want any new players. Pochettino sings a different song. The bottom line is if you don't win anything and you're commercially a very successful football club and you built a wonderful stadium, you're going to be sat in a situation where people like Jamie Carragher or anybody else, or even the Tottenham fans that have their moments with Daniel Levy, are going to sit there and say, time for a change. But ownership makes a certain level of difference. If you're looking at the spend pattern of Tottenham Hotspur, they spend money. Do they spend money the way they could? Do they spend money the way they should? The idea that Ange Postecoglou said there's no ceiling, what he said was there's no limit to his ambitions. He doesn't want to put a ceiling on that.
Yeah.
And that's probably a more fairer characterisation.
Simon, look at the messages that are coming in. A lot of them laying the blame at Levy. Now, I know that in some quarters that's unfair because the man is hugely ambitious.
You're responsible for it. You are responsible as the owner of the football club. If you set yourself up as a big football club and you don't win anything, then you reap the whirlwind for it.
Yeah.
You look at it and say, over 20 years, some would say Arsenal have underachieved. As a football club, they built a stadium. They spent years having to bankroll that stadium, and they've won 3 FA Cups.
Do you see Daniel Levy stepping aside, Simon, anytime soon?
Someone writes him a big enough check, yeah.
Well, can he not just step aside and say, "Okay, I'll just take a back. I'll take a backward step in terms of let somebody else make some of the key decisions, and I'll just see how that works." He can still retain his ownership.
Well, again, it's like assumptions, isn't it? You've got two different versions of events. You've got the events that Daniel has, that basically he doesn't choose the players; he only chooses the budgets, which most owners do anyway.
Yeah.
And so, with that in mind, what I ask you again, honestly, what does it have to do with Daniel Levy, Tottenham not being able to retain 2-goal leads?
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.